You're listening to Encyclopedia Podcastica, a podcast from the Silicon Valley Skeptics.
Hello and welcome to Encyclopedia Podcastica. I'm Hunter Perrin.
And I'm Matt Courtney.
Encyclopedia Podcastica is recorded and filmed in front of a live studio audience. That is our wonderful studio audience today. So Matt.
Yes, Hunter? I
had my flu shot recently.
Oh, good. So did I.
Good.
Yeah.
I hope everyone in the audience had theirs.
Mostly.
So we're going to talk about vaccines today.
Yes, that's right. And flu shot's a vaccine, too. I don't think
Indeed,
we're going to go...
the flu vaccine is a vaccine.
Yes. We said flu shot, so I wanted to be like...
Okay, yeah.
Sure that people...
Well, if you're actually getting a shot of influenza, then it's probably not a vaccine. You're just
getting
a glutton
sick
for punishment.
That's right. Right.
So let's talk about the history of vaccines.
History of vaccines. So history of vaccines kind of starts in about the 1100s, where they didn't really have...
1100s?
1100s.
Wow.
It's way back. But the thing is, they didn't really have a vaccine then. So what we're talking about is smallpox, right? Big problem, killing a lot of people. And, people wanted to stop that from spreading. Well, somewhere along the line, and somewhere around the 1100s, somebody discovered that if you take dried scab material from a smallpox victim scabs and basically implant it into somebody else who hasn't had it yet, it inoculates people from smallpox.
I don't want to do this episode anymore. That's really gross.
Yeah. It's called the variolation technique, I believe is what it's called.
It's called the really gross, disgusting
It's called the really, it
technique.
gets even better than that. So It's not really a vaccine yet, but it's getting there. The Europeans use this technique. How they were doing it was just like getting a little bit of the dried scab and then just sticking it into the skin, like in your arm or something like that, right?
Gross.
What's even better is the Africans, who separately developed the technique. Instead of putting on the skin, they'd actually I guess they would grind it up into like a powder and blow it up people's noses.
Ew.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually less gross, but why?
Really? I feel like that would be even worse.
Then pushing it into, would just they puncture the skin?
They have to puncture the skin.
Yeah, that's gross. That's more gross than putting it up your nose.
Okay. Well, this isn't really a vaccine because it doesn't really completely stop it. What actually is happening is you're actually giving the person smallpox. But doing this technique, if you're controlling how people are getting it, you can reduce the lethality of it to just 1 or 2%. So only 1 or 2% of people died, as opposed to if you get it naturally. Natural smallpox, where 30%.
All natural organic smallpox.
All natural organic smallpox is right. Right. So this was going on for hundreds of years, right? This is the only way there's only pseudo vaccine, I guess, that was around for a while. I think there were some other treatments for other things, but this is kind of the big thing. So moving forward on smallpox, this guy, Edward Jenner, in 1798 came up with the theory. He's like, maybe if we take a similar virus to smallpox and give it to people, maybe that similar virus is not as lethal, it's not as dangerous, maybe that will protect them. So he finds a similar virus, the cowpox virus, which I think happens people catch it if they're around cows a lot. So it's similar to smallpox, but it's not quite as virulent, not as deadly.
And this is even before we came up with germ theory, right?
Right. So this is before germ theory.
We're just kind of trying stuff out.
Right. So he takes basically he takes some cowpox pustule liquid.
Oh.
This is going to be a really disgusting episode.
This is a really like the science of it is not that disgusting, but
It's actually well documented. He
Ugh.
takes it from the hand of a milkmaid, Sarah Nelms, and gives it to an 8-year-old James Phipps.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And it actually works. James Phipps doesn't ever get smallpox. And
did someone with smallpox just go and like rub up on him, just like
I don't know.
try and give him smallpox?
So that's considered the first vaccine. I think that started to spread mostly throughout Europe. And
Just an
because-
actual disease, just not for humans.
right.
Was the
Well, it
vaccine.
was like a human vaccine, but it was somehow different because of cows.
Well, it was cowpox.
Cowpox.
It's a disease for cows that you're giving to
don't-
a human that's related to a disease
guess
for
so.
humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Anyways, the cowpox was also known as Vaccinia. I think it was called Vaccinia.
Vaccinia?
Yeah. Which is where we actually get the name vaccine from.
Because vax is Latin for cow, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving forward, there wasn't. I guess from there, people started like actually developing different versions of vaccines and stuff, and people were trying different things. But we're going to jump ahead to a rather important vaccine, which started with in 1948. Harry Reaver of the National Foundation of Infantile Paralysis, which later became known as the March and Dimes Foundation. So you probably know it better from that name.
Yeah.
So he goes up and talks to Dr. Jonas Salk and asked him to help them determine like how many different types of polio there were. Right. So at the time, they knew that there was about 3 different types of polio. There was no vaccine. It's like causing all sorts of problems, killing a lot of kids, making a lot of people paralyzed. So they're doing like sort of the first steps towards understanding it and trying to get a vaccine made. Well, Salk was like, hey, I have this small lab. I really want to expand it. I need money to do it. So he decides to help out and start working on not specifically a vaccine, but just trying to figure out how many different types of polio there were, right? Well, he's like messing around with it, doing his experiments, and somewhere around the line, or somewhere along the line, he figures out that, hey, we can actually make a vaccine for this, and begins working on the vaccine for polio.
Which was a really shitty disease.
Which is a really shitty disease. In fact, while he was working on it, says he starts like in 1948. In 1952, the U.S. had the worst polio outbreak ever, with 58,000 approximately total cases of polio, where 21,269 people were paralyzed in some way, not necessarily completely paralyzed, but at least partially paralyzed from it. And 3,145 people died. And of all of those cases, most of them were children, which is really sad.
Damn.
Yeah.
So a very shitty disease.
Very shitty disease. So Dr. Salk is working on his vaccine. He's actually working like from reports, he was doing it like 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for years, and started this big polio vaccine program. And the search for the polio vaccine, because it was so important, it became like one of the most elaborate programs of its kind in history. Thousands of people were involved with actually like developing the vaccine between physicians and other support people. And 1.8 million school children were eventually involved with the polio vaccine, actually, basically testing the vaccine.
Can you call it a test if you're
with that many?
If it's that many kids?
Yeah, it is still a test, but yeah, it was like huge. Those school children actually were known as polio pioneers for some reason. I don't know why that was like kind of a thing, but yeah.
You think these were the polio vaccine pioneers?
Yeah, you would think so.
Because a lot of people had already had polio.
Right. Well, on April 12th, 1955, they finally get all the results of the trial in, and they're going to announce it to the world. This was kind of like the Super Bowl of vaccine announcements, as I like to think. So it was at the University of Michigan. They had 500 people, including 150 members of the press, come into this room to hear the announcement. It was televised, or they actually set up theaters across the nation for physicians to watch this announcement directly. So they had like a live broadcast, and there was 54,000 physicians across the nation watching at the same time. And the Eli Lilly and Company paid $250,000 to broadcast it out to everybody.
It's less than the Super Bowl.
Well, if you consider $1952, maybe not.
Probably still
less.
I don't know.
It's probably still less.
But certainly
it's about
more
as close.
Certainly more important than the Super Bowl.
Right. I mean, it was about as close to the Super Bowl as vaccine announcements could ever actually get.
Well, you say that now.
Right. We could have a big announcement in the future.
If there were ever like a cancer vaccine.
I was thinking AIDS. That'd be a really big one.
Well, yeah, but I think cancer would
also be
cancer would
big.
be more.
Probably.
I think because cancer affects more people than AIDS does.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think like if you live long enough, like everybody gets cancer.
Yeah.
Anyways, Dr. Thomas Francis Jr., who monitored the test results, he actually was one who was talking. It wasn't Dr. Salk. He didn't give the announcement. But he declared on that day that the vaccine was safe and effective and had an 80 to 90% effectiveness rate, which is really good. That was a good effectiveness rate for a vaccine. And it started to spread through. The vaccines program kicked off in the U.S. and started spreading throughout the world. Someone asked Dr. Salk afterwards, like, who owns the patent? Because who's making all this money off of this vaccine? And you know what he said?
What?
He actually replied, there is no patent. Could you patent the sun? So basically, he spent all this time and effort on this amazing, medical miracle and didn't get any money from it.
That is very
directly.
un-American of him.
I think it's very American. I know what you're talking about.
Honestly, in America, you probably could patent the sun.
You probably
Actually,
could.
I want to try. I want to patent the sun.
Is there like,
You can buy lots on the moon. You could probably patent the sun.
Probably could. Well, you can't patent the moon, but you can buy the moon. So maybe you can buy the sun. Can you like buy spots?
I'll patent the moon.
Okay.
Good luck.
Moving on in history. So there's a lot of other vaccines created throughout the time, but we're going to talk about something that was kind of a bad thing for vaccines. So in 1998, I can ask the audience, what happened in 1998?
What happened in 1998?
In 1998, this guy named Andrew Wakefield published a research paper in The Lancet. Of course, The Lancet is a highly respected UK medical journal. I want to make sure the audience knows about that. So this is not like, I don't know if you've heard about like the big controversy now around journals, where there are a lot of really bad ones that you basically just pay to get into the journals. This is a really well-respected, I think juried, I guess you call it, journal, where you actually have to go through like some rigorous testing and stuff.
Some actual peer review.
You have to do peer review, to get into this journal. So it was kind of a big deal. Well, this paper documented that 8 out of these 12 children who were normal before receiving the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, which is the MMR vaccine. They were normal before getting the vaccine, but they ended up losing acquired skills like language. They've also experienced some abdominal pain and some other things. So the paper is basically saying that these kids were getting a form of autism from the vaccine. So of course, parents hear about this. It goes through the media like crazy. And, parents are hearing about this. And of course, nobody wants their kid to get autism, right? So the vaccination rate actually, it wasn't just the MMR vaccine, but all sorts of vaccines, people were stopping. They weren't getting them. The rate dropped precipitously, went from around 90% to 70% in certain places in the UK, and actually became much lower in other places, some places in the US and more recently, which is really sad. And of course, when the vaccination rate dropped, the rate of measles sharply increased, especially in these
Makes
places.
sense.
Yes, especially in places where the vaccine has been around for a while, and it was dying out. There's still places you can go to that had measles, but it was slowly dying out, and first world countries, it was kind of going away.
Yeah, in 2000, measles was considered eradicated in the U.S.
Right. Wow.
There were no more.
That was all the way. It was 2011.
No, 2000.
In 2000.
Yeah, in the year 2000.
And it's very much come back.
Yeah,
since then.
it's back
There's
now.
Been a number of outbreaks.
Thanks, Andrew Wakefield.
Yeah. So some people started looking into actually almost immediately after the paper was published. People were looking into it, like what's going on, and they were finding problems with it. First of all, the first major problem was no one could actually replicate the study in any meaningful way.
And that's one of the most important tenets of science,
right? Is
you have to be able to replicate something before it's considered valid.
Right, exactly. If you can't replicate it, what's the point?
Like those guys that claimed that they had done cold fusion in their backyard.
Right.
They couldn't even replicate it.
Right.
So that's why we don't believe in cold fusion in your backyard.
Pretty much. But there are other problems, there's 8 children of the total 12. Well, not all of them were actually normal before the vaccine was given to them. 5 had actually shown signs of development delays before the shot. So they were actually showing signs of autism before getting the vaccine, which kind of defeats the whole cause and effect thing. And the other problem is 3 of them were never diagnosed with autism at all. So they didn't even have it, which is not right.
That accounts for all 8, right?
That's all 8. I don't know if the 3 were the other part of the other 4 of the total 12. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not the 8. That's not the 8 of.
I'm not sure actually, because the research that I was getting this from was not entirely clear. But yeah, so some of them didn't even have it, but definitely the 5 of them that did have autism are showing signs before getting the vaccine, which really, defeats the whole cause and effect thing. Well, it also turned out that Wakefield had financial interests in this outcome.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. He was actually being funded by lawyers who had planned to represent the parents of these kids who had autism or thought they had autism or something. And the lawyers wanted to sue the vaccine companies and make lots of money, of course. And the other thing that Wakefield did was he actually filed for patents on a safer MMR vaccine. supposedly safer, because he didn't really prove that the original was not safe.
That is quite a glaring conflict of interest.
Yes. Yes, it is. And after all of this had come out, so Wakefield wasn't the only author of the paper. He was like the main author, I guess, or something like that, main proponent. Well, there are actually 13 total authors of that paper. And 10 of the original 13 signed a formal retraction. 10, not including Wakefield, of course. The retraction actually stated there is no causal link. No causal link was established between the MMR vaccine and autism, as the data were insufficient. So that's pretty clear.
Yeah, if even the people that wrote the paper don't believe the paper.
Right, exactly. Well, in the aftermath of all this, in 2010, the UK's General Medical Council, also known as the GMC, they had a tribunal on Wakefield, right, and went through a whole trial on him and found that he was guilty of 4 counts of dishonesty, and 12 counts of involving abuse of developmentally challenged children. Apparently, I'm
easy for you to say.
Speaking challenge today. So basically, he was abusing these kids. Now, it wasn't like he was hitting them or something like that, but basically he was doing tests on these kids that were invasive and were unnecessary. That's what they mean by abusive. But still, he's not a good person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
we just put him away for just generally being a dick.
Yeah. Well, you'd think so.
And also causing the death of a lot of people, since he was almost single-handedly responsible for the new anti-vax movement.
Correct. Well, also the Lancet, they completely retracted his findings, the original paper. So even though people still point to that paper, like the Lancet's like, no, this is totally wrong. You should not be in any way referencing this paper. And
good for them.
And the UK's, very good for them. And the UK's GMC also stripped Wakefield of his medical license. And he is no longer allowed. He's no longer allowed to practice in the UK. And I don't think he had a license in the US to begin with. So he can't practice. He can't practice medicine pretty much anywhere.
Good.
Unfortunately, he is in the US.
Can we kick him out?
I don't think we can. Really.
We should start a petition to kick him out.
Right.
Just like send him on a boat out to sea.
Without a paddle or something, right?
Without oxygen. Out in space.
Oh, okay.
Let's just launch him into the sun.
And
I'll patent the sun, and then I'll launch him into it.
It's pretty violent. But I wanted to, I found this comparison that was interesting between Wakefield and another infamous person. On November 18th, 1978, 909 people died in Jonestown, Guyana, after being coerced by their leader, Jim Jones, to basically commit suicide. So Jim Jones didn't actually kill the people. He basically talked them into killing themselves, right?
So he was kind of indirectly responsible for their death.
Directly responsible, yeah.
And that was 909 people.
909 people. In contrast, since the new anti-vax sort of movement began, because of Wakefield, 9,000 people have died. Mostly children, which was not true of Jonestown. There were children, but not mostly.
Is there like an opposite to the Nobel Prize?
Ig Nobel.
There's Ig Nobel, but I don't think
Nobel.
that's the really what you're going for.
Yeah, I want like a...
He actually did win a lot.
I want like a, this guy is probably legitimately a demon prize.
Yeah. Asshole
If
of the world.
demons exist, this guy's one of them.
Right. He actually did. I saw a whole list of different foundations, including, I think, the James Randi Foundation, giving him awards for like quackery and stuff like that. But I didn't list them out because there was a lot of stuff. It would have taken way too much time. But that's all I got for history. There's a lot of other history involved with vaccines, but we don't want to like do another 2-hour episode.
Yeah, we
if we can avoid
we
it.
could go on for ages about the history of vaccines, but let's talk about the science of vaccines.
Yay.
So vaccines work with your immune system.
Really?
Indeed.
Okay.
Actually, there might be people that don't know that.
I believe you. Hopefully they're not people watching our podcast, or maybe it's good they are.
I don't know. I've heard a lot of people say like they want to eat this or this or this because it strengthens their immune system, right?
Right. But that's exactly what.
That's literally what a vaccine does.
Right.
And it really does it.
And you don't even have to like eat like specific stuff all the time.
Yeah.
You just get a shot.
Get a shot
one day.
There you go. A strengthened immune system.
Wow. That's amazing.
So there's two parts to your immune system. There's the innate immune system, which is the kind you have since you're a baby. Like it's part of you always. It includes things like your skin. Your skin is actually part of your immune system. It keeps things out of your body.
Wow. That's
unless it gets cut. And when it gets cut and something gets into your body, that's when macrophages are there to help. They're basically these big cells that just eat up all these foreign invaders.
Okay.
So that's your innate immune. I mean, there's a lot more to your innate immune system than that, but we want to talk about the acquired immune system. This is the one that vaccines work with. They work with a specific kind of cell called a B cell. And they recognize friend from foe. And they do that using special proteins that your cells present on the outside of their cell membrane. And when it comes in contact with a protein that it doesn't recognize, it will see, like if it binds with one of the proteins that this B cell has, it'll activate the B cell. And the B cell, because it bound to that, will start reproducing like crazy. It'll just copy itself over and over and over again. And a bunch of those copies become what's called effector cells, which mass produce the matching antibody to that antigen that attached to them. So if something attaches to one of the antibodies that this B cell has on the outside, it'll just start producing that antibody like crazy.
That's cool.
And some of those cells become memory cells. And this is the most important part, because the memory cells will stay behind after your body defeats an infection.
So not like a neuron. This is a special kind of cell.
Yeah, it's like chemical memory.
Okay.
And it just has all these antibodies on the outside. And if ever again in your entire life, if another pathogen with that specific antigen ever binds to that cell, it will immediately go into mass production mode for that antibody. And that's how your body remembers what it's come into contact with. If you get measles and your body manages to defeat it, then you will never get measles again.
That's pretty cool.
Because every time your body sees measles, it'll go, oh, I know that. I have a special weapon against that.
Right.
And it'll create all these antibodies. And the way antibodies work is they bind to the antigens that are on the virus or the bacteria or the fungus. And it will block them from getting into your cells. And it will also clump them together. And by clumping them together, it makes them a lot easier for the macrophages to absorb them and to digest them, which is the whole purpose of a macrophage.
Okay.
And that process of first being introduced to a pathogen, finding a matching antigen, going into crazy reproduction mode, making a bunch of those antibodies, takes about 7 to 10 days the first time.
Okay.
Which means if you get measles, you're going to have a measles infection for 7 to 10 days before your body discovers the key to defeating measles.
About a week to a week and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's going to suck.
Yeah.
But we've developed our own secret weapon,
Ooh.
vaccines.
Right.
Vaccines are basically the pathogen.
Right.
Like you're basically injecting measles into your body when you get a measles vaccine.
Right.
But it's not the kind of measles that you would get out in the wild. It's a special kind of measles, or a special kind of flu, or a special kind of whatever vaccine you're getting. And there's three types. There's three types of vaccines that we have developed so far. The first one is called a live attenuated vaccine, which is actually a living version of that pathogen.
Wow.
It's a real version, but it's been severely weakened. So your body can take care of it like easy peasy.
We hope that it's weakened. And in the history I did find in a couple cases, they tried to weaken viruses and it didn't quite work out so well.
Well, that's why we have trials, right?
Right. Exactly.
So the next type is an inactive vaccine, which is just a dead pathogen. Yeah. We just kill it, and your body sees the antigens and is like, I need to defeat that, even though it's dead.
So that's the polio vaccine that Dr. Salk developed was a dead pathogen.
Just a dead version of polio.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then the last type is what I think is the most interesting type. It's called a subunit vaccine. And it is just the antigen.
Okay.
And your body...
So just a part of whatever it is.
Just this one little protein. It's not even the whole pathogen. It's just the little antigen protein that your body it'll connect to some antibody on one of your B cells, and your B cell will start producing that antibody like crazy, and it'll defeat the infection really quickly because it's not reproducing. It's just an antigen. And you'll have those memory cells. So if ever there is a pathogen that has that antigen, you'll just immediately be able to kill it.
Cool.
Which is why vaccines are awesome. So if vaccines are safe, then why are people scared of them?
Well, the live virus one was a little scary.
Well, it's weak.
It's weak. That's true.
But actually that one, a lot of the live virus, or a lot of the live attenuated vaccines will have something to weaken the vaccine in them, which is actually usually a dangerous thing, like formaldehyde. There are some vaccines that have formaldehyde.
Right. That's really bad.
Yeah. If you drink a gallon of formaldehyde, you're going to die.
Right.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, it's not a gallon of it.
Okay, fair enough.
So it's part of how they work. The formaldehyde is used to weaken the pathogen.
Right.
To the point that it can't even hurt you.
Right.
But the fear of the vaccine for this case comes from the misunderstanding of what a poison is. So a poison isn't just any substance. A poison is a substance and the amount of that substance.
Okay.
They're only poisonous at certain doses. Like your body can take a certain amount of cyanide, a certain amount of arsenic, a certain amount of lead, whatever. It's not going to kill you immediately.
Right.
And just like those, your body can take a certain amount of formaldehyde. In fact, your body produces formaldehyde during digestion. A lot more formaldehyde than there is in any vaccine.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's a lot more formaldehyde in an apple than there is in a vaccine. Yeah. Quite a bit more.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So it's just people don't understand why these substances are in there, and that these substances are nowhere near the amount that you would need to be toxic.
Okay.
So they hear that formaldehyde is in a vaccine and they're scared. Rightfully, because it sounds scary. It
does sound scary.
We should, try and help people understand that just because a vaccine contains formaldehyde doesn't mean it's enough formaldehyde to hurt you.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, always remember the dose makes the poison. And sometimes the pathogens are weakened so much that it might not trigger an immune response.
Okay.
Which in that case, we add something to a vaccine called an adjuvant. And an adjuvant is a substance that will stimulate your immune response. Things like aluminum or aluminium to those across the pond. Aluminum will create an irritation near the injection, and that will trigger your immune cells to swarm into that area.
Okay.
And that ensures that they meet the pathogen, the weakened or dead or cut up pathogen.
But aluminum's not that bad for you.
It is, if you have a big dose of aluminum.
Right. Like one shaped like a knife and stab.
Well, but also if you were to just like eat a bunch of aluminum, yeah, it'll hurt you.
Okay.
But
it's
again,
a tiny amount.
Yeah, the dose makes the poison.
Right.
There is nowhere near enough aluminum in any vaccine that contains aluminum to actually hurt you.
Okay.
It's just enough to trigger an immune response.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, some people, because of Andrew Wakefield, believe that vaccines cause autism. So they don't, first of all. Vaccines do not cause autism.
Yeah.
That, as you explained, that
well
study has been thoroughly debunked.
Yeah.
But it comes from a couple other misunderstandings than just Andrew Wakefield's study.
Right.
Such as autism diagnoses are on the rise.
Right.
But notice I didn't say autism is on the rise.
Right.
Autism diagnoses are on the rise.
So why is that?
It's because we've gotten better at diagnosing autism.
Really?
There were just as many people who had autism before. They just weren't diagnosed.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
sense. So it's
sense.
a good thing that the diagnoses are on the rise.
We can actually help people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can figure out this person that before we would have no idea what was wrong with them. Now we know they have autism, so we can get them the help they need.
Right.
And also autism first presents around the same time that children are vaccinated.
Right.
Obviously because you're vaccinated basically from a few months old until you're 6.
Right.
So
you're getting all these
at
shots.
Pretty much any time, if a child develops autism, you can look back and find that they were vaccinated. So it triggers all sorts of these unconscious biases in us.
There's also an issue, when I was looking up some of the stuff with Andrew Wakefield, is people are saying that their kids got autism the next day or a couple days after. But when they actually talked to them and really looked into it, it was more like they became autistic months later, and people are just not remembering and remember they didn't remember the vaccine, but they didn't remember that there was such a big gap between the two.
Yeah, and humans are prone to biases. Everyone's prone to biases. We're prone to biases.
We are.
Our audience is prone to biases. Everyone watching and listening is prone to biases. Every single person is prone to unconscious biases.
Right.
We just got to work through them and try and teach people. And another big reason that people are scared of vaccines is that most people have never experienced the diseases that vaccines prevent.
Right. So it's not really that they're scared of the vaccine. They're just not as afraid of the disease it's protecting against.
Yeah.
Because
vaccines vaccines do have risk. You can be allergic to a vaccine, you can have an adverse reaction to a vaccine, but it's so rare compared to the rates of getting these diseases without vaccines that it is a much better bet to take the vaccine than it is to allow yourself to get infected with measles or mumps or polio or whatever.
Right.
Vaccines work, and they work so well that our generation has forgotten the consequences, the horrible consequences of polio, measles, pertussis, mumps, rubella, smallpox, diphtheria, tetanus, typhoid fever, malaria, yellow fever, and pneumococcal disease. Wow. Those are just some of the diseases that vaccines have eliminated from the experience of people lucky enough to have access to modern medicine.
Right. Almost eliminated now that people are not getting the vaccines.
Yeah.
A lot
They're
of
coming
them,
back.
like, there's a big measles outbreak, and
Yeah.
pertussis, which is
That's whooping cough. Yeah.
And that's been like a big deal recently.
Yeah, it's
as
coming
well.
back. If we don't keep vaccine rates high, these diseases will come back.
Yes.
And that should scare you a lot more than a vaccine.
Right. I'm
So
afraid
do we
now. This is
this episode has been
downer.
Yeah, this episode has been
Downer
depressing
opening.
and gross but you know, it's an important topic. It's a really important topic. People need to get vaccinated. We don't want all these diseases coming back.
Right.
It would be terrible.
Yes. Very bad.
Yeah.
Think of the children.
Won't somebody think of the children? Yes, please think of the children. And think of other people besides you. Because vaccines don't just help you. They help people who are immunocompromised. They help people who are too young or too old to get vaccines. Herd immunity is a thing.
Right. You didn't really go over herd immunity, but
if you get vaccinated, even if you're not at a high risk to get one of these diseases, it'll help someone who is at a high risk to get one of these diseases. It'll help you not spread the disease to them. So if you're not even going to get vaccinated for yourself, get vaccinated for other people.
Right.
So
I'm vaccinated.
I'm vaccinated. It's a good thing.
Yes. I believe our audience is vaccinated.
Yep.
They're nodding their heads.
Does our audience have any questions?
Can you talk more about herd immunity and this measles outbreak?
Yeah. So herd immunity is basically the idea that if there are not enough vectors for an infection to spread to new hosts, it's going to die off.
Right.
And the people who aren't able to get vaccinated.
Right. So some people can't get the vaccine
Yeah.
because of all the other stuff that you talked about in the vaccine.
If
some people have allergies to them.
Yeah. Or if they're immunocompromised, that a vaccine would actually cause an infection.
Right.
They can't get the vaccine.
Yeah.
If they're too
Big one
old
with
to be able to handle an immune response like that.
Right. With the
or
flu
too
shot,
young.
that's like a big one because they grow it in eggs. So people who are allergic to eggs can't get it.
Yeah,
it's a
you
little
could
bit
be
different
allergic
because
to.
not everybody gets the flu shot, which is a big issue.
Yeah. So herd immunity will keep the number of vectors down because each disease has a rate at which it spreads to other people. And measles is actually really contagious.
Extremely contagious. One of the most contagious diseases out there.
Most people who get measles will spread it to like around 12 to 18 other people. Compared to something like Ebola, which is a much lower a rate of spread. It's much less contagious.
Yeah, I think like normal diseases, I mean even like the flu or something, if you get the flu, you generally will only spread it to like 2 or 3 other people if they don't have their flu shot, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's like normal for disease. Like 2 or 3 people is how far people generally spread disease. And some are more and some are less. Obviously, measles is like way more.
Yeah. And if you catch measles and you're not vaccinated, you could still even just carry it and not know, and you could end up giving it to a baby, and that baby could die because of it.
Right.
Or you could give it to an elderly person, and they could die because of it.
Right. Yeah.
So vaccines are important, and herd immunity is important. I think the rate of vaccination for herd immunity to work for measles is 95%.
Wow, that's really
so,
high.
Yeah, if less than 95% of people are vaccinated, so if more than 5% of people don't vaccinate for measles, herd immunity doesn't work. And those people that can't be vaccinated are at risk.
Right.
Yeah, any other questions?
Do you have anything to say about the latest vaccine for cervical cancer, HPV?
Yes. Well, I don't know if you had anything to say.
I haven't heard
but
about this.
There's a vaccine out for HPV.
Human papilloma virus.
Right.
Yeah.
Should know the I just read a little bit about it. And so the issue, or what it protects against that virus, which they've recently found causes cervical cancer later in life. Now, this disease is actually, I believe, a sexually transmitted disease. And that's where all the controversy is. There's actually, as far as I know, no problem with the vaccine. Everybody's fine with it. It works pretty well. It's not 100%, but most vaccines aren't. But because it is related to a sexually transmitted disease, there's a good number of people who are saying that if they give their kids this vaccine, they're basically saying, hey, kids, go out and have sex. You're fine. You're vaccinated from this disease. And that's really not what's going on at all.
We all know that trying to prevent teenagers from having sex works every time, right?
Works about as well as trying to push water uphill, I believe.
Yeah, or nail Jello to a tree.
Yeah, exactly. It's really not going to work. But so there's this big group of people who are against this vaccine for no real reason except it's about over an icky disease, which we don't want people to get anyways.
Yeah, and there are other ways to get it than sex.
I think there are, but it's the most common way, I believe. Yeah.
But still, why would you want to just not protect
why
yourself?
Yeah.
Or not protect
And why
your
would you
kids?
want to keep people? Because they were trying to get it banned or something. And
That's terrible.
there was one person who was trying to say just like the MMR vaccine and all, others, it was causing something like autism or some other problem. I don't think they were saying it was autism, but they're saying people are coming down with something. And
Coming down with a severe case of horniness.
Right, exactly. That's terrible. But yeah, that's what I got from that one.
When's the last time that an attenuated virus actually caused problems in people?
I don't know about the last one, but I know one that was big because it was part of this talk with the polio vaccine. So Dr. Salk was working on the killed version, right? Completely killing the virus. Well, there was a number of other researchers who were trying to use the live virus and use the attenuated virus method. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but one of the trials, they didn't do a good enough job of actually attenuating the virus. So they ended up giving fully virulent polio virus to kids during the trial. Yeah. And a number of kids actually caught it. Yeah. Now, this wasn't a big trial, so it was only a few kids, which was good, but terrible that they got it. So that actually set back the work for the polio vaccine quite a bit.
Yeah. On that topic, I wanted to add on to your Edward Jenner story.
Yeah, go ahead. I did a very small section on him. So
he gave cowpox to that child and then waited a couple of weeks and then injected him with smallpox.
Is that what he did?
Hoping that everything would be all right, and he lucked out.
Wow.
Human trials like that happening today.
It just worked.
Yeah, you would never be able to do that today.
No. You can get away with
that
it.
Is
in the 18th
completely
century.
unethical.
Yeah. I think Dr. Salk actually ended up, as part of the trial, injecting himself with the polio vaccine.
I heard that, yeah.
Wow.
To jumpstart
And
it,
his I think his whole family as well, after he did himself.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's brave.
Yeah. And that's really not something you're supposed to do. It's ethical is not quite the right word, but it's, generally
Stupid.
doctors who are working on some, vaccine or something like that, they're not supposed to
I think he
inject themselves.
his family before anyone else to show that it was safe. Is that?
Yeah, I think he was trying to show that it was totally safe, especially when you had that other trial that
Wow.
didn't work out so well.
Yeah, it's an impressive move.
Yeah.
You mentioned that some people can't have vaccines because they're produced using egg products. Is there a gluten-free vaccine?
I believe, well, that's specifically the flu vaccine. I think there's some other ones that use the egg, but I know it was like, because the flu vaccine is like the big one. If you have ever gotten the flu vaccine, you know that you fill out the form, and one of the things on the form before you actually take it is, are you allergic to eggs? Yeah. Because they grow it in eggs. I think there is a special form of the vaccine that you can get that is not grown in eggs. So you're okay with that. But it's harder to make. It's probably more expensive. Generally, people who have an egg allergy don't end up getting the flu vaccine.
So that's kind of like a lead-in question to my aunt, who's very into crystal healing and acupuncture and all that stuff. So when I try to have scientific conversations with her, it never goes anywhere, and I'm usually okay with it. But with the topic of vaccinations, she's actually putting people at risk. Yeah. What do you say to someone like that to try and...
My answer is, I don't know.
Yeah. Because science isn't working when I talk to her about science.
Right. The only thing that I heard of that sort of kind of works, and I've never really had the chance to try it, is basically you break down why they think what they think, right? You're talking about, where they got this information from, why do they think it's true, show the science of, the vaccines and stuff like that. If you know it all, which is
acupuncturist. That's
right.
What's going on.
Right. Where is the science behind it? That sort of thing.
So we have a waifu from our last episode.
I also have one that I didn't write in, but you can go first.
Okay. So, whoops, I fucked up in the last episode.
Yeah. Also a pillow, I think.
When you...
What? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Dakimakuras are often called waifus. Don't Google that.
Yeah, don't do it.
So when we were trying our hottest hot sauce, I mentioned that...
Before or when you're actually in pain, and so we can actually forgive you for making this screw up?
No, I think I had already tried it. And,
okay, we forgive you.
Our audience had come up to try it.
Yeah, that's right.
So you had mentioned that it was 1,000 times hotter than...
Right.
Or no, you said something like 16,000 times hotter than what we were eating, and I said 16,000 times hotter than pure capsaicin when we were talking about resiniferatoxin.
Right.
I was wrong. Resiniferatoxin, I misspoke, is 1,000 times pure capsaicin on the Scoville scale, and what you said was correct, 16,000 times what we were trying, which was 1 million on the Scoville scale.
Yeah. I'm glad my math was correct.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't believe you the first time. So my waifu was, I mentioned a story about how buffalo wings were invented. And the problem with the story was there are a bunch of different stories, all by the same person. It's the same person who was telling the story. I don't have her name written down, which is part of the reason. I think it was Teresa Bellissimo. And I just picked the one that sounded best to me. So that's, but I forgot to mention that in the actual podcast, but it's not really sure how true that story is, but it's plausible.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Hunter. And
we want to thank CyberSDF for letting us use their songs Welcome and Mellow Acid as our intro and outro. And Blue Wave Theory for letting us use their song 900 Turbo as our waifu music. And we want to thank our wonderful studio audience. And if you're watching on YouTube, remember to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we will see you down in the comments. I hope everyone gets vaccinated, because that will all be on the test.
Encyclopedia Podcastica is a production of the Silicon Valley Skeptics, an organization dedicated to promoting science and critical thinking. You can find us on Twitter at SVSkeptics or Facebook at facebook.com/SVSkeptics. You can contact us at svskeptics@gmail.com. If you like the show, please rate us on iTunes.